Good morning. Hemshech Hayom Beis, Volume 2. We are on page 1190, closer to the top. Okay. The discussion here, which is a big part of this section, Hayom Beis, last close to 200 pages, has been about V'yadaita Hayom, the pasuk in Veschanon, the verse in Deuteronomy. V'yadaita Hayom, you shall know today, V'ashavesa levavecha, you shall carry it or draw it into your heart. Ki Hashem Hu Elokim, B'shamayim Mima'al v'la'oretz mitachas, heavens above and the earth below. And the last words are Ein Oid. So Rebbe Rashab literally has explained every word in this verse so far. V'yadaita Hayom, Havaya levavecha, the heart. What is das Elyon, das Tachten, Hashem Hu Elokim, is essentially uniting the divine that is beyond, the transcendent divine, with the divine within existence. The two different ways, das Tachten, das Elyon, Yichud Eloh, Yichud Tata, from the bottom up, meaning recognizing the divine within existence, and from the top down, which would be, that's the Ayin of the Yesh HaNivra, the Ayin of the Yesh HaMiti. The higher level would be recognizing that the real essence, the real truth, the true reality is Yesh HaMiti, and everything else is nullified. This was all part of the explanation. Hayom explained, Yom and Laila, Tzimtzum and Eir, because the goal is to transform the Tzimtzum, the concealment, into revelation. The last section, the last mimer, we've been learning, B'shamayim Mima'al v'la'oretz mitachas. What are the two phrases? Why do you need both? Heaven and earth come together, seemingly. If God is in heaven, he's also on earth. And the answer, the initial answer, Pipashit, the first answer in the last mimer, was Al Pipashit, he said, is to negate duality, that the divine is on earth just as much as in heaven, in the material just as much as in the spiritual, because from the point of view of God, he's beyond both matter and spirit equally. And Adarabah, on the contrary, the main goal, the main objective, and the main drawing down of the divine essence is in Oretz Mitachas, is below in the material world. Mitzvahs Maisias, the mitzvahs we do in this material world, and that adds and draws down etzem, the etzem of the divine, even in Atzilus and in the higher worlds. So it negates the argument of that the lower material world is inferior or God has left it to be governed by nature or by the nations. And also negates the same argument spiritually that how could you find the divine in actionable mitzvahs, which seeming to be a very mundane mitzvahs, essentially. But in this mimer now, he's coming and going to give a deeper, well, he doesn't say deeper, he says, Yesh lemer oid, more to explain this, what that means. And the parentheses we're in the middle of is putting it into context, because what exactly does this verse come to teach us? Now, before we get to that, let me go back to the broader context. Where did the whole V'yadaita Hayom begin? The Shavuos mimer of Ayin Vov, Ayin Hey, now already in Lech Lecha involved, the Shavuos Maimer in Ayin Hey began the whole thing on page 996. That's where V'yadaita Hayom began. But I want to just put that in context to what we learned before that. Before that was an extended and a long discussion on how do you transform post-Tzimtzum reality to be able to, post-Tzimtzum consciousness, to be able to experience a pre-Tzimtzum reality when they seem to be mutually exclusive. The whole existence is predicated on concealment. If you were to reveal the light before the Tzimtzum, it says there's no room for existence. That's the Eitz Chaim. That's why there's a Tzimtzum. So how could you have post-Tzimtzum, pre-Tzimtzum? They seem to be two different domains that can't coexist. And the answer was that we can't, not to bypass the Tzimtzum, not to override it, not to surrender to it, but to transform it. When we transform the concealment, which is really in essence only meant to bring more revelation, And the lifnei tzimtzum was only meant in order to be drawn down after the tzimtzum. In other words, embedded in both of them is the other. In other words, lifnei tzimtzum and achar tzimtzum are only ostensibly contradictions. The goal, however, is that the lifnei tzimtzum is really to be brought into post tzimtzum, and the tzimtzum is in order to reveal. That's how we transform it. In simple English, when we transform our animal soul, which is drawn to material life, and redirect it to godliness, like he said, birurim, yichud tata, das tachten, that the yesh turns toward the ayin, the divine, the Havaya Hu Elokim, that the Elokim recognizes the Havaya within it, we transform the Tzimtzum. And then comes a higher level, which we're going to learn about shortly, where we experience the divine on the divine in terms of godliness, not just from the way we see it from below, that God is the primary reality and existence, and that's Havaya Hu Elokim. The other way that Elokim, not just Havaya within Elokim, but Elokim, or like you put it, Shiluv Adnai Ba'Havaya, where it's all seen as part of a higher truth of godliness. But that's the next stage. And there we spoke about a third stage that's still higher than Ishtalshus. The third stage is where the Dei Amitis, which he called Etzem, the Etzem itself, the Etzem HaNeshama. What is that? 1 second. Sorry about that. Okay. Good. The Etzem HaNeshama, the difference between Naran, Chai, and Yechida, as we learned earlier. Now, all this came to explain the Tzimtzum, transformation of the Tzimtzum was the Torah of the Magid. How do you bring the divine after the Parsa? Because a microcosm, the Tzimtzum, the issue with the Tzimtzum is also the issue, how does Atzilus go to Biyah? In between there's a partition called the Parsa. And the Torah of the Magid, which brings us back all the way, I'll just tell you that brings us back all the way to page, where did that begin? All the way back to where is it? The Mimer of Truma? No. Yeah. Page 790. So 790 began the whole discussion of the Magid, that we take that the two halves, two half images, God, godliness, and existence. And that came to explain the two interpretations, whether it's Mima'al Lamato, Mima'al Lamayla, from the top down or the bottom up, Torah and Tefillah. Are you drawing down Rememus, Keser, the transcendent, the Havaya, into down below, into existence, into Elokai Melech, the divine Elokai, Elokim, Melech, which is the Malchus lower level? Or that's Torah does that, or Elokai Melech, that Elokai Melech is being elevated to Arimimcha, through davening, through tefillah. Now, most of the discussion really has been here about Mamata Lamayla, but it's inevitable that he spoke both sides. When this parenthesis ends in a while, in volume 3, he's going to go back to Torah Mamayla Lamata. But meanwhile, in this long parenthesis of over 550 pages, the Rebbe Rashab is explaining the Magid's Torah that explains the idea of the bridge and the interface, which of course is the central theme of Ayin Beis. So all that we're learning now is more primarily is about Mamata Lamayla, not Mamayla Lamata. Mamata Lamayla, but it's connected because we learned Das Ayin and Das Tachten. Torah and Tefillah have been mentioned quite a few times. The reason I'm elaborating about this, not just to give context as I usually do on Sunday, but also because it's relevant to what we're right now talking about. He's literally going back to the Mamayla Lamata, Mamata Lamayla theme. And that's the context of basically volume 2. In context of volume 1 of Ayin Beis, it's all about this unity of the divine and existence, this bridge, this interface, of the Eir HaBligvul and the Eir HaGvul, which goes back all the way to the beginning of the Hemshech of Keser and the 10 spheres. Keser is always Aramimcha, is a transcendent, like Havaya, and the 10 spheres are always the level of immanence, Eir Pnimi. And you want to join Eir Makif and Eir Pnimi. And in both ways, Mamata Lamayla, Mamayla Lamata. This, in essence, is the central theme of Ayin Beis, with many more details, of course, of the Eir HaBligvul, Eir HaGvul, the Ovis, Matan Teira, the different levels of spheres, all about explaining how we bridge the two realities. Now, before we continue to learn where we are on page top of 1190, I wanted to take you back to what I just mentioned, Taf Kuf Tzadik Vov, because I think it'll also help with context. There, he asks questions that are now being answered for the first time. So we're talking about Taf Kuf Tzadik Vov is 996, and now we're on page 1190. So what is that? Almost 200 pages, 194 pages. Back, Taf 996, and now we're 1190, right? 190, yeah. 194 pages back. Okay. So I wanted to just go over the context, because he's actually answering questions he asked back then. It'll help understand this whole flow that I just described. Now, so if you have the Sefer, I mean, it's in the Sefer, if you have it 996, Taf Kuf Tzadik Vav. I'm not going to read it all, I just want to read key lines. So you look at the beginning of the paragraph, he says like this. In order to understand with additional explanation, the transformation of what? The transformation of Tzimtzum to Eir. All this is, he says, Yesh lahavin mashakosa ve'yedaita Ayin v'shaves levacha ki Havaya Hu Elokim b'Mima'al v'aretz metachas ein oid. So all this is coming to explain the transformation of Tzimtzum to Eir. So he says like this: V'tzarich lahavin ma'u Ayin b'Mima'al v'aretz metachas the ma'achad Hashem Hu Elokim b'Mima'al v'meila k'moikenu b'aretz metachas. Since Hashem Elokim is in the heaven above, so seemingly it's also Mima'al, also on the earth below. Shari brisa shemayim v'aretz haya b'shava k'meshakasa b'reishis bar Elokim is shemayim v'saretz. God created heaven and earth equally. The shneim nivru m'shem Elokim. They both were created from the name Elokim. B'reishis bar Elokim. The kashem shebriyas haaretz iyaf shaliyas m'shem Havaya. Just like the creation of the earth cannot be from Havaya. Same thing, heaven can't be from Shem Havaya, because both of them require a Tzimtzum. So then, since heaven and earth are on the same plane, the same domain, both Elokim, from Elokim, so once the Pasuk says to us that Havaya Hu Elokim, meaning the Elokim that manifests within existence, Havaya Hu Elokim, it's really coming, Havaya, the transcendent divine that's beyond existence, has now manifested in existence. Since Shemayim and Eretz are in the same dimension, they both come from Elokim. So once you let the Pasuk tells us that the heaven is that way, what does he come to add by saying it's also on earth? Why does he have to say also on the earth below? Okay, I'm stopping right there for a second, because then he asked the next question is, what is Ein Oid? Ein Oid won't be explained until later on page 1207 in volume 3, just for the record. The reason I read this, because this is the exact question that he's coming to answer on page 1182. That's where he begins. If you look there, he said that he in his Barlim Akushya, Ma'u Emer b'Shemayim al v'aretz metochas. The whole mimer that we learned last few weeks, or whatever, last 2 weeks, is all coming to answer the Pasha to answer that there's no duality, that Ha'aretz Metachas comes to add that godliness is also on earth, also in the material, not just in heaven. So though they're both the same domain, but still earth can suggest, as the nations of the world say, yeah, Lekayim. Ozav Hashem, God left earth. And you can't find godliness as much in mitzvahs maisis. How do you could find it in spiritual meditation? So he answered that, but now on this page, in this mimer, 1189, 1190, where we're up to, he's giving now a further explanation, which is going to be a lot more consistent with the whole theme that it's mamata lamayla. Because if the mimer before, you could argue that Shema Ma'al Mitachas is mamayla lamata. It's through mitzvahs. That's the parentheses that we're learning now. He's explaining that mitzvahs is all mamayla lamata, because even though it's a mitzvah below, but God is giving us these mitzvahs. He's giving us talis and tefillin, as he said, and krishma, that allows us to wrap us around makif and pnimi to connect with the divine, as we learned in the last classes. That even the nefesh habamit should also be able to understand yichudei law, a higher dimension of the divine. But he says it's all mamayla lamata. In this mimer, he's going to explain how it's mamata lamayla. Now, why is that so necessary? So let me continue reading on page 996. After he continues, he asks the question, is Ayin Oid? He goes back and says like this. He asks another question. Why do we say Veyadaita Ayem? If you read further down, I'm back on 996. He says, okay. I just want to add one thing. But Ayin, he says that Ayin tells us that it's deeper than the unity in Shemayim and Aretz. But we're not going to get to that till much later. So, but just keep that in mind, that Ayin is going to add in the level of unity that even the Tzimtzum itself becomes one with the divine. Right now, we're talking about the godliness within existence. The Yesh Ayin of the Yesh HaNivra is one with the Ayin of the Yesh Amiti. Havaya Hu Elokim, and both ways. So just keep that in mind. But then he goes back and asks another question. Why do you need to have the pasuk v'yadaita Hayom in the first place? Haloik kfar nemer ata reis ladas. In the same pasuk Veschanan, just a few verses earlier, he says, Ata reis ladas ki Hashem hu Elokim eined milvade. So why do you need another pasuk v'yadaita Hayom? That's what he asked there. The line that begins Elokim on page 996. So now here's how he answers. Ayin who the mashakos of atares ladas b'derech mamayla lamata. Atares ladas means ata, you have revealed yourself for us to know you, Havaya Hu Elokim. So who's doing that? Hashem is doing it. Hashem is revealing himself for us to know ladas ki Hashem hu Elokim eined milvade. That's mamayla lamata. And he goes on to explain that was what happened by Matan Torah. The Eibishter revealed himself. That's a mamayla lamata experience, not mamata lamayla. Goes on to explain. I'm moving quickly. I want to go all the way. Back to page 997 now. Let's go to the line. It goes on, but Matan Torah, it's all mamayla lamata. Omna Mashakosov, line 7 on page 997. Now read this, listen to this. Omna Mashakosov V'yadaita Hayom hu b'bchinas mamata lamayla. That does not say God reveals himself. It says, you should know me. You should know, not me. You should know and feel that Hashem hu Elokim in the heavens above and earth below. So it's mamata lamayla. Sha'odam yibay hayidiyah v'hakara. The Torah is giving us, telling us that the person should have a recognition, an awareness and a recognition. B'koyach atzmei, through his own effort. Eich sh'Hashem hu Elokim. V'hayidi b'derech mamata lamayla. This awareness is in the form it's coming from below up, from down upward. V'hainu shemebchinas Shem Elokim novi lidei hakara amitis Eich Havaya Hu Elokim, which means that from Shem Elokim, you're working your way up. Elokim is the divine that's embedded and concealed in existence. Bereshis Bara Elokim. And from there, you're coming to an awareness, the true awareness that Havaya Hu Elokim, that God is not Elokim. That Elokim is not. God is not just part of nature, but God is beyond nature. Havaya Hu Elokim. V'hu sheme'at Tzimtzum va'elam. This is vital. That's why I'm reading it, because this is all going to come now together in what we're learning now. What does that mean? V'hu she'at Tzimtzum va'elam. The concealment, the diminishment, and the concealment. Novin eich Havaya Hu Elokim. From the Tzimtzum, which is Elokim, you come to understand. We come to understand how Havaya Hu Elokim. And also in this orderly fashion from the bottom up, first in the lower levels, and then in the higher levels, that you climb from level to level, so it's not just once you go from Elokim to Havaya Hu Elokim, but the whole Seder Shtal says that's what it consists of. It's climbing a ladder, retracing the steps that we always discuss about, how from the lower level with his concealment, you come to a higher level and you keep growing and elevating step by step by step. All mamata lamaila. So v'yadaita, in contrast to ata reis ladas, is a from below upward effort. The kachu ba'aveda shebederech mamata lamaila. This is how it is when you're doing your work from the bottom up. It has to be in a step-by-step way. Hadraga means structure. You can't leap. It has to be step by step. What's another word for hadraga? Structured. Yeah, step by step. And listen to what he says.
Hadraga is miloshin madrego. Hadraga madregot. Step
by step. Yeah. Now here's vital lines. Listen to this. Like we learned earlier, the difference between Torah and tefillah and prayer. By Torah, you could also jump. You can go even higher than your level. In other words, you can go beyond yourself. That if he immerses himself in matters that are beyond his comprehension, nevertheless, through effort and exertion, he can come to understand them to some extent. This is what we're doing. We're learning Ayin Beis. We're not on this level, but our minds in Torah, Torah, in other words, can lift you to places that are beyond your own level. And Itaka elevates through in his comprehension in a true way.
Which daf?
What are you asking me?
In which page are you?
What do you mean? I said already 5 times where I am.
You said Tov Kuf Tzadik Zayin and Tov
Tov Kuf Tzadik Vav and Tov Kuf Tzadik Zayin. I'm reading Tov Kuf Tzadik Zayin. 997.
Okay, thank you.
So Besala be'emes basagosai dezeh shagam in yonim haktanim baskalosim yevenesim beifanacher. And Itaka elevates his mind that also things that are smaller, he understands them in a different way. So even a smaller person has a smaller understanding. Even the things he is elevated in the mind. This is the cognitive. But now listen to that's al mamai lamata thing, like ata reis ladas. Torah is giving you power that you can use your mind to reach places you yourself are not ready, are not even on that level. But tefillah, on the other hand, in tefillah, im yelech le'ela medarga. If a person in davening jumps a step, goes to a level higher than his status, than his state, lo yifo mu'umah, it will not have any impact On the contrary, he'll be deluding himself. God forbid. You have to go in an orderly way. First in the lower levels. And when he comes in his Aveda to a level that he comes to a level that he's commensurate to him, fits him, like he says, in other words, he comes to a state that a certain Aveda is demanded of him, behooves him, this new state. So then, in other words, it's not just you can sit down and learn about ideas that are beyond you. In Avedus Atfilah, you have to be on that level. You can't daven with something that you're not that level, because it's not. It says that, on the contrary, it's actually deluding yourself. So then he's able to go these new levels. When he's ready for those levels, then that's when he's able to go madrega le madrega. Remember, he referred to Yisrael on the top of 1190. Yisrael is Mima'al lamata. Yaakov is Mamata lamayla. The Yisrael of Maloshin Kisarisi Malikim. Yisrael is from the name that the Malach gave him. It means that you, Kisarisi Alikim, you battled with Alikim v'Anoshim v'Tuchal. You won over, you conquered. Shemoishel shelet al Hashem Alikim. Kisarisi Alikim. That means you're stronger than Alikim. Elikim, they're referring to the Mala, but the idea is stronger than Shemish Hashem Elikim. That's Yisrael. That's a revelation from the top down of Shem Havaya. When that comes from above, then Mamela automatically you see, and it's obvious and revealed how Hashem Hu Elokim. Yaakov, on the other hand, who Aveda b'derech mamata l'mayla. Yaakov, on the other hand, is the Aveda from the below, from below upward. Commercial is shall be explained. V'zeu in v'yedaita Hayom shu b'derech mamata l'mayla. That's v'yedaita Hayom from the bottom up. And here I want to just read the next few lines because the Rebbe Rashab is laying out the groundwork of what he would explain now later where we are now. So with this he answers the question, V'yedaita is not ata hareis ladas, it's mamata l'mayla. But we still need to understand Shemayim Mima'al v'aretz mitacha. So he says, Shemayim Mima'al v'aretz mitacha zeu ba'beis madreges the Havaya Hu Elokim shen isbar le'il. These are the two levels that we discussed earlier, Havaya Hu Elokim. Shezeu be'er en sof habligvul, the infinite light, u'be'er shebemidah v'gvul. So Havaya Hu Elokim is both in the Er habligvul, Havaya Hu Elokim are one, and the Er hagvul, Havaya Hu Elokim are one. This was discussed earlier when he spoke about the Tzimtzum. We're going to learn about it on page 1190. That's why I'm reading it. So even though you may not understand what he means here, we'll soon learn it. This is what he says, in the heavens above and the earth below. The yichud of Havaya Hu Elokim on both levels. How it is in heaven, which would be the Er HaBlikvul, and how it is in earth, how it is in the Er HaGvul. All this is the Giluyim in the worlds. Because all this is Havaya Hu Elokim, the Ayin of Yesh Amiti, Ayin of Yesh Anivra. Ein Eid is in the world itself. And that's going to be explained in volume 3, as I said, page 1207. We're now by 1190, so we have a while till we get there. Okay. So why did I say all of this? then he continues, if you look on page 997, so now he begins by explaining Hayom. Hayom, he's going to explain, is Yom and Laila, Tzimtzum and Oyer. From that, he's going to go to Rotzi and Shuv, to Shabbos and the weekdays, to Lechem in Hashamayim, the bread from heaven, the bread from earth, to Das Elyon and Das Tachten, to the Ayin of the Yesh Amit, the Ayin of the Yesh Hanivra, all the way back to V'yadaita Das, Levavecha Hargosha, that brings to emotions, and then he comes back to B'Shamayim Mima'al V'Aretz Mitochas, which we're learning now. That's the flow. So that's why I wanted to bring it all together again, to see how the Rebbe Rashab is really, literally almost 200 pages, as I said, of this whole structure. And I was going back to understanding what means Shemayim Mal Arts Mitachas, the two Havaya Hu Elokim. So in the previous Maimer, he explained it, that it's referring to a yichud, that it's not duality, but also the divine is also below. But he didn't get into Mamata Lamaila. Remember, V'yadaita Hayom is primarily Mamata Lamaila. So he didn't get into that yet. The only thing he did speak about is that, yes, that through the mitzvahs below, we draw down a er atzmi in lamaila and lamata, kagavna, like he said, the higher worlds, the lower world corresponds to the higher world through Adam, ubara Adam al kula, through the human beings aveda. But now he's going to go deeper into the discussion of tzimtzum and gilui that he alluded to, that he's mentioned briefly back there. So what is this Havaya Hu Elokim mata lamaila? That we come from the tzimtzum, we come to oir, like you said, from Elokim you come to Havaya, step by step by step, and that's the two levels. B'Shamayim Mal V'Aretz Mitachas Havaya Hu Elokim, whether it's Eir HaBligvul or Eir HaGvul, which we're going to discuss now. So it'll be clarified shortly when we learn it, now or the next few days. Okay, so before I continue, if anybody has any questions on what I spoke about now.
Yes, I do. It says that through learning Torah, you get to see things in a different way, even small things. And then it mentions that if one leaps, by davening, creates difficulties. But it sounds
it's delusional. Where's the difficulties?
He didn't use the word difficulty. Okay.
It says it's delusional. That's what the word he used.
Okay. It sounds priceless. Fact that by learning Torah, you see things in a different way. So it doesn't sound like he's referring to that kind of idea that creates delusion.
That's not
that correct.
Tefillah. We're not talking about Torah. In Tefillah, when it comes to the work that you need to do, you can't jump to a level that you're not holding by. I always say that's why I always say about mathematics in Ayin Beis, learning gives you a sense of something, but now you have to work on it to make it yours. Learning is not change you internally. Learning gives you a picture. It's like standing on a mountain and you see the picture. Chassidus and Torah gives you a picture, but he made it clear that's Mamayla Lamata. That's not the Aveda Mamata Lamayla. Aveda Mamata Lamayla, which is the Iker, that it become yours, only one way, that you do it step by step, that works for you, or else it becomes delusional. Like he said, you can't. So the mind can dream about things. We can dream about Mashiach. We can talk about it. We can learn about it. We can understand it even. But there's a whole other thing is feeling it and experiencing it. That's what we were expected. We're not just expected to learn about it academically. We want to experience it, that it should be a personal thing that on a daily basis, your animal soul is living with it. Not just as a revelation from above, but from the work below. That's the whole purpose of existence. If God wanted from above, he wouldn't have to create anything. Why does he need us? He sees the whole picture from above. So Torah is meant to give us the strength and the guidance and direction. But tefillah is where it becomes who we are. And that's where you must go step by step. You can't delude yourself into thinking you're on a level that you're not.
So it sounds like that perspective that you achieve by Torah, that's what you want to try to integrate in yourself by tefillah.
Well, but it doesn't work the same way. In tefillah, you have to work on yourself. In Torah, you have to just learn. And your mind Yigiyah Sameach, like he said. But in Phil, you have to actually work on yourself. Let's put it bluntly. You can know all the levels lifting at Tzimtzum and still be a very cruel and selfish person. So it's quite a leap.
We're talking
The
about
Torah,
small
all the Torah
things.
can do is tell you what's expected of you. But now comes the hard work of actually refining yourself. It's a very big difference. There are many professors that are very smart, but they're lowlifes.
Yeah, we know that.
So the same thing here.
But it could be the other way too, couldn't it? Couldn't you be a wonderful mitos, work somebody davens with a flame, but he's an Amaretz as far as Torah goes.
And Nochanami, that's why he says, that's why we have Torah, Aveda, Gmilas, Chasadim. Torah without tefillah is not complete, tefillah without Torah. I mean, this is the first time you heard that you need to have Asusa Delela and Asusa Delatata?
No, but it was sounding like here that the avoda of milamata lamaila was primarily tefillah, and Torah was milamayla lamata, whereas it seems like
You
Hagia, the
never heard that
Torah.
before? The Torah in general is Mima'al Lamata.
Yeah, sure, but it seems like the Hagia in V'yadata Hayom, to come to that level comes more from learning Chassidus, as you said on Friday, than the davening part. The Yigia and Torah. You have Yigia and Torah also.
Yeah,
It's
but
not
it says Rashavesa Levavecha. You forgot about that. Tefillah is belev. The Adaita is with the mind, but tefillah is belev.
Right.
You need both. What is unclear here? Why do we?
No.
What's the problem? You need both. There's no way around it. Torah alone, Matan Torah happened over 3,300 years ago. Atar Esel Adas. At the time, the Jews were elevated, but then they built a golden calf 39 days later. And we've been in Golis now for thousands of years. That tells you something, that all that L'mayla Lamata did not permeate existence because we need Aveda Lamata L'mayla. This is like, I mean, I'm not surprised, but think for a moment. Everything you've learned you've learned this many times. Every Sikh, every Maimer talks about this one way or another. I think you probably never took it to heart, maybe, but if you take it to heart, that's the two, you need both. And each one has something the other doesn't have. I even referred you which chapter to read, where it explains exactly what Torah and Tefillah each one accomplished. Should I give you the page again?
Yes.
But read it. Do me a favor, read it. You want
And
me to see,
take it to heart.
1 second. You want me to do the work for you. That's
No.
Mima'al Lamata. You're going to have to do it yourself.
Okay.
I worked hard to get to this place here. So now you're going to have to do the work. There's no shortcuts, my friends. Okay, so if you look at pages, let's see here. Let's talk about Aramimcha L'Kayim Melech. At page 785 and on. Read 785 through 789, 4 pages. And you'll have a very good picture of the difference between Torah and Tefillah.
Rabbi, quick question. Maybe you
Yeah.
said this already. Maybe this is exactly what you're saying. But when it says V'yadaita Hayom, on the one hand, and it says V'hashavosa alav avecha, the first part is from L'mayla Lamata, and the second part is from Lamata L'mayla. In other words, first
I didn't
Das
say that.
has to, well, I'm
I didn't
asking.
say
Let me finish the question. Well, I'm asking that question. Also, V'yadaita, you said Das is a mental, it's a cognitive thing. But in order to elevate yourself, it has to be essentially work of the heart. It has to be an actual effort on your part, not just contemplating something, but doing it. Is that part of why it says both V'yadaita and V'hashovosa alavecha? Are these things connected?
I tried to do one thing here. I tried to learn the Maimer as the Rebbe Rashab intended to tell us. So the first and most important thing is to understand what the Rebbe Rashab is saying. Then we can try to speculate and guess other things. So let's just begin with what the Rebbe Rashab said. I hope everyone understood it. I'll repeat it just in case you didn't, because this is what. Can everybody mute? Can everybody mute, please? Okay. What the Rebbe Rashab said was the following. First of all, when you compare the verse Ata Reisel Adas and V'yadaita Ayin V'shveisel Levecha, Ata Reisel Adas is Matan Torah, referring to the revelation from above, where God said, I have revealed myself, so you should know me. That's generally Torah. That's Torah. V'yadaita Ayin V'shveisel Levecha, he says, is Mamata L'mayla, and that's generally Tefillah. That's what he said. He didn't break Vayadaita and Shavesel Vavecha into two. I only mentioned it. If you want to break it into two, because he does say both, he says Vayadaita and Shavesel is generally Umata Lamayla. So you could say a few things. First of all, we talked about learning Chassidus before davening, or learning Torah before davening. That's not like learning Torah after davening. So learning Torah before davening is part of davening. It's achana. To prepare for davening, Chassidim Erishonim Hayu Shoyim, they would concentrate and contemplate and could create space, prepare their minds. So number one, you could say V'yadaita Yem in that context is V'yadaita, that's part of Tefillah, V'shavesel Levavecha. Even if you want to say it's learning Torah, it's still in Torah itself, it's part of the Mamat L'maylav. But the Maimari doesn't say any of this, so it's speculation. Maybe he'll say it later, maybe he won't. So overall, V'yadaita Yem V'shavesel Levavecha, he says is Mamata L'mayla. So either you could say it's part of Tefillah, or when you really think about it, I said this a number of times, there's no black and white. Torah also has Yigiyah b'Torah. He said also Yigiyah. So there's a Mamata L'mayla and the Mamata L'mata of Torah too. And Tefillah also has elements. The words of Tefillah, for example, Shema Yisrael, are words from Torah. So Tefillah also has elements of Torah in it. However, the main focus is the primary role of each one of them. What Tefillah is, you're working with yourself from the bottom up, and Torah is from the top down. So that's the overall way I would say this without going into further detail, because as I said, the Rebbe Rashab just makes the distinction I just explained. That's all he does. The difference between V'yadaita Ayin V'shavesel Levavecha and Ata Reisel Adas. Now,
Got it. I
Ata
understand.
Reisel Adas, you don't have Levavcha, tells you something. In other words, in V'yadaita Ayin V'shavesel Levavecha, it's work like we learned earlier that Das, V'yadaita Ayin is Hargosha, is the bridge between intellect and emotions. Now there's also Ata Reisel Adas, but that's a Das that comes from above. That's God giving us Das. And here it's a Das that we work on and we initiate b'koyach atzmei, as he put it. Anyway, that's how I would learn the Maimer and any additional things. That's as far as I would go, because more than that, the Rebbe Rashab doesn't say. Even what I said now, I'm speculating what it could mean.
Okay. No, that was great. Thank you.
Okay.
Also, a very nice summary of what you said the past 15 minutes. More concise. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Now, with all this said, let's go back to the Maimer here. Unless somebody wants to ask something more. Okay.
I'm still a little bit like to ask, let's just drop further. We say even small things, you'll see it in a different aspect. Now, we're saying that there's still a chasaron, but can you illustrate what that means, like a small thing? I mean, you mentioned, all the levels of Tzimtzum. I understand that it's not going to touch a person. It's not his turf. It's not where he lives. It's not going to make any difference in his life. It's very nice. I mean, he can probably daven for 6 or 7 years on all the levels of Tzimtzum. Probably will never touch him. But when the Rashab mentions that by learning Torah, it changes even Dvarim Getanim.
In Seichel,
what's
Dvarim
the
Getanim
Torah?
in Seichel, not in Midas, not in the person, in a Seichel. When you learn deeper things in Chassidus, it helps even a person who earlier did not understand or was a smaller mind, understand smaller things you understand on a bigger level. Understanding. He doesn't say Dvarim Getanim as in personality.
We're saying that doesn't change a person. Even
It has
small
nothing
things.
to do with Aveda B'chlal. Learning Torah is about understanding things. Anyway, I don't know what to say more. I mean, I can't. The difference between learning Torah and Aveda, you just said it clearly. You can learn it.
He still says you'll see.
He says Devorim Tach. But he says clearly. He says Yonim Ktanim Baskolosom Yevin Esim Efanacher. In his understanding, that's all it is. It's the mind.
And that won't influence the person at all. Okay.
Absolutely not, unless there's Aveda. Anyway,
Okay.
first of all, he doesn't say it won't
I have a
influence
question
a person. Maybe it'll influence him to do Aveda. How about that? Look,
Yeah.
I'm not
that's
going to
the
say,
goal.
I should correct myself. I'm not going to say that when a person learns Chassidus and doesn't daven or doesn't do any Aveda, there's no influence. I'm not going to say that.
Of course there is.
But it definitely does not transform a person, and it doesn't have to. Aveda is a necessity, period. Okay.
All right. Good.
So going back to where we are now, 1189, 1190, he's going deeper into B'Shamayim Mima'al V'Aretz Mitachas. So he says, Havaya Hu Elokim is not the mitzvah of Liyachdei. Which is in the pasuk of Shema Yisrael. And also, mitzvah in general is Mima'al Lamata. That's what he said on the bottom of page 1189. And he explained why. The whole process. Even the animal soul that's elevated during Shema in Talis and Film to a level that it could appreciate Hasoga the Yichudi law, he still says, Kol Zayad Hamshachah Mima'al Lamata. Madregas Yisrael, not Yaakov. Okay. That's where we're up to. Line 4 on page 1190. I'm going to read now further. The Mashakos v'yadaita yem. Now what it says v'yadaita yem, hu b'derech mamata l'mayla. Commission is boiled, Dibra Maskal v'yadaber kol advarim, the pages we just read. On page 997, Tov Kuf Tzadik Zay. So yadaita yem is not l'mayla l'mat. It's not liyachdei like Shema and atar reis ladas. He doesn't mention that here. Which is Ma'ala Lamata. He's talking now Mamata Lamayla. So what is this Mamata Lamayla? How does it work? How is it different than the Yichud of Liyachdei Hashem Echad Mamala Lamata? So he says, "Who the Mishem Elokim anu Yedim the Havaya Hu Elokim." That you're beginning from Shem Elokim. Remember, he said that on 997, page 997. You're starting from Elokim. In other words, you're not starting from a power from above, from Havaya. From Elokim, you come to know. We know that Havaya Hu Elokim. V'hainu, this means the Mahat Tzimtzum anu Yedim from the concealment. Tzimtzum is Elokim. Shemesh Shemagan Hashem Elokim is God's power. Hein Hein Gvuresav his power to conceal himself. From the concealment anu Yedim, we come to know the Tachlis HaKavona Hu Hagilui. That the purpose of it all, the purpose of this Tzimtzum is Gili. The purpose is revelation. Ushat Tzimtzum b'shvil hagili. And that includes the Tzimtzum itself, that Elokim itself comes to teach you when you work on it through your Aveda. That the Tzimtzum of Elokim, as much as it's a concealment, it's in order to bring revelation. Vayedeh Aveda, and through the work, through the person's Aveda. Behipuch HaTzimtzum, I mean, you could say Behipuch HaTzimtzum, but I think he means Behipuch, in the transformation of the Tzimtzum, like he said on page 996. He used Hipuch. HaTzimtzum, Yegili Shem Havaya. Through the Aveda of transforming the Tzimtzum comes the Gili Shem Havaya, which means the Aveda of transforming your animal soul through your effort, not from above, becomes you achieve the Gili of Shem Havaya. Now, this is all very dense and very brief. The obvious reason is because he discussed this at length in the earlier pages that some of it we learned and some of it even before that. So I'm going to try to bring explanations into this based on what we learned there. But all the things, I would say the next good 10, 15 lines are ideas that he explained at length, and here he's only referring to briefly, but they need long explanation, especially if you don't remember or didn't learn it. But it's all referring to ideas back in those pages, especially the earlier pages before, about the transformation of Tzimtzum to Gili. Because remember, in the last little while, we haven't talked so much about Tzimtzum. We talked about the two dimensions of the divine and how we go from the Yesh Hamit Nivra to the Ayin of the Yesh Nivra. But now he's bringing back the central theme of transforming the Tzimtzum, which was about V'yadaita Hayom v'shavleis levecha. Remember, the whole thing he said on 996, to understand better the transformation of Tzimtzum to Eir, let's go to the Pasuk V'yadaita Hayom. Hayom was Tzimtzum and Eir, Yom and Laila, and now he's coming to Havaya Hu Elokim. He's going to now connect Havaya Hu Elokim to the Tzimtzum and Eir. So from Tzimtzum we come to Eir, basically. That's what he's saying right now. That's Mamata Lamaila. This means that Elokim ubchinas hatzimtzum b'chol hamadreges shenizbar le'il. When we say the word Elokim, we're referring to the level of tzimtzum in all the levels we've just talked about earlier. Whatever level you talk about, there's an Elokim within it, which is the tzimtzum of that level. If you remember the Ayin of the Yesh Nivra, remember how many different ways he explained it? In Atzilus, in Biyah, higher than Atzilus, in Keser, and even higher Lifnei Tzimtzum. Wherever you went, Elokim, he says, is the Tzimtzum in all the levels, wherever level you're talking about, when you say Havaya Hu Elokim, Elokim is the level of the Tzimtzum, meaning the divine energy as it begins to relate to existence. Remember when he used the words Hashayach La'elamis, the Eir Hashayach La'azulas. There's the Eir, the energy that's beyond another, the divine that's beyond existence. And then there's the divine as it relates and engages with existence. Malchus, the Ein Sof, compared to Teferes, the Ein Sof, compared to higher levels. Etzema Eir, Spashta said the Eir as it relates to another. So all the levels of Tzimtzum, of Elokim, all the levels having them is the Elokim, is the Tzimtzum in each of those levels. It's a very important line because it helps understand everything we learned till now. V'ayidei ha'aveda, and through the work, the effort, la'fech ha'tzimtzum, to transform this tzimtzum. What does it mean to transform? Not to see it at face value as a concealment, as an end in itself, but to recognize that you're transforming, that is really a part of the revelation. And it's transformed to, you're transforming it that way. Shezeu b'chinas ha'rotzeh. Oh, wow, he's going back to Rotzeh. If you remember in Hayom, he said Rotzeh and Shuv, Rotzeh. That's the level of Rotzeh. In other words, the Tzimtzum on its own could be Shuv, but when you recognize it's really Gili, that you're not allowing yourself to surrender to the status quo. So you're in a state of yearning, of Rotzeh, recognizing that you want to go upward. That's what he says here. He's bringing Rotzeh here, is very interesting. We haven't heard the word Rotzeh. You know, when the last time we learned about Rotzeh, goes back a while, but that was the point. That Rotzeh v'shuv is essentially that when the air comes down through the Tzimtzum, it gets concealed. But the goal is Aveda, that you shouldn't remain happy with that. That you should be yearning and wanting to go upward. That's what he said, Rotzeh and Shuv. Rotzeh was Shabbos. Shuv was the weekdays. That you go up to Naliyah to go up to a higher level. So Elokim, in the state of Tzimtzum, is going up through Rotzeh to recognize and reveal the Shem Havaya. If you want exact where that is discussed with Shabbos, at least, that was a while back. Haydaita Hayom. You really need to, we're up to here now, the Rebbe Rashab is tying together many pages here. So you got to have keep your mind, the picture here, the picture. Oh, okay, here we are. I'm looking at page 11, 1039. Aleph Lamed Tes. But that was in Shabbos. If you want the Rotzei and Shuv, a long discussion. Summer, yeah. Page 1015, Aleph Tezvav, the Maimer of Nosei, he says, Yem v'layla ba'aveda, hayem ba'aveda, b'chinas rotzei v'shuv. So the whole thing about the cheshech and the eir, that's on page 1015. So 1015 is rotzei v'shuv. What did I just say about Shabbos? What page was that? Page 1039. Okay. 1015 and 1039. If you want to know more about Rotzeh. Okay. Ukamoy Kain, and now he's coming back to the Pasuk. And the end of the parentheses. Ukamoy Kain u'mashakosav b'shamayim Mima'al la'oretz mitachas. And saying similarly, same thing as when it says in the Pasuk, Vaydaita Yem, heaven above and earth below. Harizegamkin hamshacha shaydei aveda b'derech mamata l'mayla. It's also hamshacha, but it's coming through the work below, from the bottom up. Okay. So from Elokim to Havaya, from the bottom up. But now he's going to explain what this means. He's going to explain what is the bottom up. Mamata l'mayla of Havaya Hu Elokim. So, as I said, bear with me, bear with us, and be patient. So we're going to learn that now. Should we stop here or should I continue?
Maybe do a little more so you can connect it.
Okay. Va'inyan hu, and the inyan of this is, and I was going to explain mamata l'mayla. The inamatzina lepomim, we find at times that Havaya Hu Elokim is repeated twice. Beis pomim Havaya Hu Elokim. In Vaydaita Hayem, it's only said once. But there are times you see twice, it says Havaya Hu Elokim twice. Which he alluded to already earlier, if you remember when he said Derech is gematria twice Havaya Hu Elokim. Back on top of page 1187. And he said, Hashemayim Mima'al Oretz Mitachas is the two times, but actually he does not say Havaya Hu Elokim twice. It says it once. But there are places that you find it actually. Ukamoy Gabe Eliyahu. So we know the story with Eliyahu and the Evdei Baal, the sorcerers, or whatever you want to call them, the Evdei, the idolaters,
Idol worshippers.
the idol worshippers. And there, the Ksiv, when Eliyahu says, Mila Hashem, whoever wants to go with them should go with them. And whoever wants to come with me to God, come with me. And then what did they say? And what did they declare? When they did that, they said, Vayemru, Havaya Hu Elokim, Havaya Hu Elokim. Twice. So in other words, those that went with Eliyahu to the path of God, not the path of idolatry, didn't just say once Havaya Hu Elokim, they said it twice. V'Rashi b'Sheftim Siman Hey, and Rashi there in the Pasha Sheftim, which is the story there, right? Shiras Dvera, in the 5th chapter, the 5th kapitel, Kosav, b'Shem Medrash Agoda. So it's a Rashi that says the name of Medrash Agoda. Rashi explains what this means. B'Simnai Amru, this is Rashi. By Sinai they said, Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Uba Carmel, Bahar Carmel, which means by the mountain of the Carmel, that's where it all happened. The story of Eliyahu happened on the Mount Carmel. Yemru, they will say Koful, Gabi Eliyahu. They will say Hashem Elokim double by the story with Eliyahu. So in other words, Rashi is emphasizing from Medrash that there's something here additional. Like, so the Rebbe Rashab asked, so Rashi is just pointing it out. But what's the explanation? Why by Matan Torah, by Sinai, it says Anechi Hashem Elokecha once, Hashem Elokecha, Anechi Hashem Elokecha, and by Har Carmel, by Eliyahu, they said it twice. Double. So what's the explanation for the double Havaya Hu Elokim? Acha Inyan Hu. So the Rebbe Rashab is going to explain it al pi Chassidus, al pi what we learned in the Maimorim of Pesach. Remember, we mentioned before the Maimorim of Shavuos. But before that, you remember the whole topic of Tzimtzum, transformation of the Tzimtzum, did not begin on 997. It began, let me take you back to there, a long time ago. The Pesach Maimorim. Vahia Onon. Here. 1 second. Page, 926. So page 926, the Rebbe Rashab began a long discussion. How could you have post-Tzimtzum, in post-Tzimtzum consciousness, a pre-Tzimtzum, or post-Tzimtzum reality, a pre-Tzimtzum consciousness? That's when he began the whole Maimer. That began the whole discussion of how can you have the joining the two. Remember, I mentioned that before. That was Vayadaita Ayin came to have an additional explanation in that. And if you look in the Maimer Vayhi Ha'onan, the second Pesach Maimer, Ayin Hey, page 934, he starts talking about the transformation of the Tzimtzum. But in order to understand the transformation of the Tzimtzum, he discusses what did the Tzimtzum accomplish. So we're going to learn now, he's coming back and refreshing our memory. They have to go back. If you want to know what the Tzimtzum, what transforming the Tzimtzum is, which means Havaya Hu Elokim, that Elokim and Havaya are one, Tzimtzum, B'shvil HaGilui, and Gilui, to come through the Tzimtzum into the existence afterwards, we have to go back to what did the Tzimtzum accomplish? And the answer is that Tzimtzum did two things. I'll say it Baal Peh, then I'll read inside. One is it concealed the infinite divine that was all consuming before the Tzimtzum. It was all about Elokus, Bli Gvul. Even though God envisioned existence, but it was all part of the Bli Gvul of God. Like the artist envisioning the art, but it's still all part of his infinite vision. Infinite possibilities and beyond. Spheres even. The second thing that Tzimtzum did, it allowed that the Pnimi. The second thing it did is, I just want to find the exact basis. That the Oyer that does come through the Tzimtzum should be measured and tailored like the Kav to be able to ultimately enter into existence. So what we learned about the Ayin of the Yesh HaNivra and the Ayin of the Yesh HaMiti, in their root, what is it? One is a divine that is only all it is, it's completely nullified and testifies that is completely nothingness compared to Atzmos, Yesh HaMiti. The second level of Ayin is important, it's critical that it engage with and relates to existence. Is the divine energy, like Mima'al that will enter into existence. The Tzimtzum needed to do two things. One is to conceal the first level of Ayin, the Bli Gvul. And the second is to measure and make sure that the Eir HaGvul does its job by creating existence. So that's the function of the Tzimtzum. The transformation of the Tzimtzum, therefore, also has to be on these two levels. One is to counter the concealment of the divine within existence, the second level, and recognize the Ayin of the Yesh HaNivra in the Yesh. That's the lower level. das Tachten. And then you need to also reveal the bligvul of that everything is godliness and everything else is nullified in the eyes of God. You can't do number 2 if you don't do number 1. No, first you have to recognize the divine in the yesh. The nefesh habami should recognize it's not all about me, but there's elokus within me and within existence. And then you come to realize that elokus is the primary, the bligvul of elokus. So it's first recognizing the divine within gvul, and then it's recognizing the infinite and boundless divine of the higher level. So that's what he's going to explain now, how the transformation of the Tzimtzum relates to both these elements, and that's going to be the 2 levels of Havaya Hu Elokim. The lower, how Havaya is seen through Elokim in the Tzimtzum, and how Havaya Elokim, how Elokim is within Havaya and within the Bligvul. So another way of putting Shil of Havaya Ba'adnai and Shil of Adnai Ba'Havaya, you'd say Shil of Havaya Ba'adnai is the divine that enters into existence, and Shil of Adnai Ba'Havaya is how existence, or I should say the divine within existence, how it's encompassed in the source before it descends and becomes a force that creates existence. Is that clear? That's what he's going to say now. But here I think we should stop, because now he's going to explain the 2 meanings of Havaya Elokim. He's going to say, Ayin hu dehinen isbar liel dibra masel vahi ha'anan va'cheshach ve'er v'yair. That Tzimtzum will be Beis in Yanim. But we're going to have to read quite a few lines. So I'm going to stop right here, middle of page 1190. But this is where we will continue. I gave the overview of what we're going to learn next. And then it's going to come back and you'll see how he ties together big part of Ayin Beis. This is also going to connect Ayin Beis back to volume 1. If you remember the 2 types of Eir HaGvul and Eir HaBligvul, that one creates existence and one brings bittul into existence. So really, if you have a good picture of Ayin Beis, it's going to be very geschmack, because he's really tying together a lot. If you don't have such a good picture, I'll try to fill in the gaps and fill in whatever's unclear to show how it's all coming together, because really it's quite amazing. He's bringing together now not just hundreds of pages, thousands of pages. I know we're already 1191, but he's bringing together a good 1,000 pages at least. Ultimately, that's what it looks like he's going here. It's not a surprise. We're coming to the end of volume 2, which would be the end of the Maimorim as they were delivered. And I just had a thought, actually, which I'm going to share when we get to volume 3, but I'll say it right now. Remember, he said all this is still in Elokus. Havaya Hu Elokim, whether it's Ayin of the Yesh HaNivra, Ayin of Yesh HaMiti, but it's all in Elokus. It's Elokim. Then he says, Ayin Eid, the end of the pasuk is going to be in Elokim itself. In the Tzimtzum itself, is the Tzimtzum itself also divine, not just as it is in Giluyim. So I was just thinking that as long as he was still in Lubavitch, the Rebbe Rashab, he was still talking as low as this is in Tachtenim in the Yesh, it's still Elokus. And volume 3, which when he would leave Lubavitch, which would mean another level of concealment, maybe he goes deeper and would of course lead to World War I, and then unfortunately World War II, the big helamas that would be coming. So maybe in volume 3, which he only wrote and did not deliver, and it was not in Lubavitch any longer, it could be now he's really going to tackle to the darkest of the dark, which is Ein Eid, even lower than Shemaim, and even deeper, but lower than Shemaim v'aretz, Shemaim mal v'aretz mitachas. Just a thought that just came to me. Just might as well just have released it.
That third level.
Did you write it in not in Lubavitch?
Well, he may have began writing it in Lubavitch, but he probably wrote much of it outside of Lubavitch. But it doesn't matter. He didn't deliver it anymore in Lubavitch. There was no more delivery. It was now the last stage of the Hemshech.
Is that Ein Od level going to be still within the Elokim, or within Yesh Nivra, within us themselves, within the Nefesh Bahamis, where there's no, it's most concealed, so to speak?
It's going to be in the darkest of the dark. That I can tell you. That I remember. It obviously begins with Elokim, but Elokim in its darkest state.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Because at the end of the day, even the darkest of the dark has to come from somewhere. Let's put it this way. Right now, he's still talking Tzimtzum and Gilui as they speak to each other. But then what about the darkest sin, the Holocaust itself? That's what it sounds like. If you look on page 997, he says, Ein eitz b'ha'olam atzmai, not b'ha'giluyim shebe'elamis. Because at the end of the day, Havaya Hu Elokim is still, the Ikar, he says, is still Havaya. And this is now going to be in the Elam Atzmei, Shem Elokim. That's what he says. If you want to peek, look on page, as I said, 1207, and the idea ends on page 1347. So it's going to be a good 150 pages just on Ein Eid.
Wow.
Yeah, I told you, Ayin Beis is
That's more than a peak. That's more than a peak. That's a treatise.
I know. I mean, the Rebbe Shab, you literally have dissecting the whole Hishtalshlus. Havaya, Lakim, exactly.
Rabbi Jacobson, when the last that Rashi, when the Rashi says B'Sinai, Amru Anochi Hashem Elokecha, Amru means they said. It wasn't said by they. It was said by Hashem himself.
I know. I wondered what that meant.
And
I have to look at Rashi.
Even if you're going to say that they said, they repeated the Seres of Dibros, they only answered either, the question was either lav or can or whatever.
Amre could also mean what it was said, not so much referring to who said it, just Amre. It's like it was said. Anochi Hashem Elokecha. It also says Amru and Yemru. Like Amru, it was said, and Carmel they will say. I want to see, first of all, in Sheftim Hey, it's not even talking about, it's Shira's Dveda, because she begins the Shir, I believe, by saying two expressions of
No,
Oh,
it's not Shiras Dveda. This is the story by Achov that Ad Mosai Ato Poiseach al Shnei Seipim.
That's the story with Eliyahu, Bahara Carmel.
Yeah.
Sheftim Siman Hey is not the Dveda?
Sheftim Simon Hey is Shiras
I am
Dveda.
telling you, that's why I said the Rashi there is not by the Hara Carmel story. He's bringing Har Carmel, but Sheftim Siman Hey is the beginning of Shira's Dveda, for sure.
Yeah.
It's the Rashi happens to be there. But you have to look in Rashi. I have to look it up. I'm not sure the Amar and the Yemru, what he means by that. Okay. Anyway, I'm going to look it up. It's Siman Hey, yeah. Right in the beginning. I'm going to stop here.